My name is Elsie Marie Blackcrow. All my life, I thought I knew who I was, until a single letter shattered everything. It said, "She's not your mother. Check the attic." What I found hidden in that dusty chest sent me on a journey of lies, betrayal, and a stolen identity buried deep in rural Montana. This is the shocking truth about my adoption story. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story of family secrets, betrayal, and a stolen identity, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that hits this deep. And stick around, because what started with a mysterious letter turned into a journey that changed everything. I'd just come in from feeding the horses when I saw it. A plain white envelope resting alone in the mailbox, no return address, just my name scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, Elsie McAllister. The postmark said Missoula, but that didn't narrow it down much. Everyone eventually passed through Missoula for something, court, college, or chemo. I tore it open with a dirt-streaked thumb, expecting a catalog or church flyer. What I found inside stopped me cold. One sentence, handwritten. No signature, "She's not your mother. Check the attic." I stared at the words, rereading them over and over, waiting for them to shift into something sensible. They didn't. Carla McAllister was my mother. I mean, she had to be. She'd raised me here on our cattle ranch in Bitterroot Valley. Packed my school lunches. Taught me how to braid rope and sing hymns off-key in the truck. Sure, she wasn't warm, more like winter cold with tight smiles and tighter rules, but she was mom, still. The sentence lodged itself in my chest like a splinter I couldn't dig out. I tucked the letter into my back pocket and went inside. Carla was at the kitchen sink, elbow-deep in soap suds, humming an old gospel tune. She glanced over her shoulder as I passed. "You get the mail, Elsie?" "Yeah." "Nothing but feed store coupons," I lied. She didn't look up again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind scratched against the window pane like it was trying to whisper secrets. The attic had always been off-limits. I'd only been up there once when I was 7, chasing a kitten. Carla had grabbed my wrist so hard it left a bruise. Told me there were things a child didn't need to go poking around in. Now I wasn't a child. And the attic suddenly felt less like forbidden territory and more like the only place I might find answers. I waited until everyone was asleep. Hank, my dad, snored like a sawmill down the hall. I crept past Caleb's door and made my way to the narrow pull-down ladder. It groaned under my weight. The air up there was thick with dust and silence. My flashlight caught broken crates, a rocking horse, and old holiday decorations. I was about to give up when I noticed the cedar chest in the far corner. Covered in a moth-eaten quilt, inside, a birth certificate. Not mine. Not McAllister, a photo of a young woman with my eyes and black waves of hair, a newspaper clipping from 1994, flathead teen disappears after giving birth. My heart thundered in my ears. I sat back on my heels, the cold floor biting through my jeans. The attic suddenly felt like a tomb. I thought I knew who I was, Elsie McAllister, ranch girl, daughter of Hank and Carla. But now I wasn't sure if any of that had ever been true, and the worst part, I had a feeling this was only the beginning. The paper in my hand shook like it was caught in a wind that wasn't there. I set the newspaper clipping down gently on the dusty floorboards and stared at the headline again. Flathead teen disappears after giving birth, October 12, 1994. I was born in November that year. My fingers were trembling as I reached back into the cedar chest. The birth certificate came next. Yellowed at the edges, it was brittle but legible. The name at the top made my throat close. Name of child, Elsie Marie Blackcrow. Mother, Mira Blackcrow. Father, no name listed, not McAllister. Blackcrow. The date of birth matched mine to the day, but the location said Kalispell Regional Hospital, not Hamilton Memorial like I'd always been told. There was no mention of Hank. No Carla. I sat back on my heels again and stared into the shadows of the attic, like the insulation and old mousetraps might offer an explanation. But they didn't. All I could hear was my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I fished out the photograph next, a young woman standing in front of a lake, dark hair whipping around her face, her eyes unmistakably mine. She looked maybe 16 or 17. smiling. Carefree. I'd never seen her before, but she felt achingly familiar. Like a ghost I'd dreamed about and then forgotten. Taped to the back of the photo was a small sticky note, faded and curling at the corners. In a shaky hand, someone had written, "Mira, summer before it all went wrong." Mira. My mother. I whispered the name to myself, letting it sit on my tongue. It felt more honest than Mom had ever felt coming out of my mouth. I stayed up there for over an hour, pulling out old manila folders, torn envelopes, legal forms. There was a handwritten note from someone named Judith, dated 1995, warning Carla that someone from the county had been asking questions about the adoption. A faded check receipt, large, in Carla's name, made my stomach twist. Bribery? Hush money. This wasn't some family secret swept under the rug. This was a whole life that had been stolen, hidden away like these boxes, locked in dust and silence. When I finally climbed down the attic ladder, I moved like someone underwater. The hallway looked different now. The pictures on the walls, the crosses above the doors, they all felt like set decorations. Like I'd been living inside someone else's version of me. I slipped everything into my backpack. If Carla found out what I'd seen, I didn't know what she'd do. But I knew this, I couldn't pretend anymore. Not with what I'd just uncovered. Downstairs, the floorboards creaked. Hank was up. I could smell coffee and hear the murmur of the TV. I didn't say good morning. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my keys and drove, into town, into the cold Montana wind, into the storm that had been brewing beneath my name for 28 years. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling the name Mira Blackcrow like a hawk tracking prey. Every memory I'd ever had with Carla and Hank now felt suspicious. The way they kept me from asking too many questions about our family. How we never had baby photos of me before age 2. The way Carla once snapped when I asked if I looked like her as a baby. That morning, the sky was the color of a bruise, heavy with snow. I came downstairs clutching the birth certificate and the photograph like weapons. Carla was at the sink, humming to the radio. Hank was finishing his coffee at the table, boots already on, ready to head out to the barn. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice like glass. Carla paused, then slowly turned around. "What is it, honey?" I slammed the birth certificate on the kitchen table. Hank looked down, brow furrowed, then up at me. Carla didn't even move. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Who is Mira Blackcrow?" For a moment, the kitchen was frozen in silence. Only the kettle hissed in the background. Carla's face didn't twitch. She looked at the paper, then me, with an unsettling calm. "I don't know what that is," she said, too smoothly. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I found this in the attic, with a photo of a woman who looks exactly like me. She's listed as my mother, Carla." "That's nonsense," she said. "We adopted you legally. Your mother, she was an addict. A danger to herself. We saved you. She didn't disappear." I shouted, the rage boiling over. "You took me. You changed my name. You lied my whole damn life." Hank slammed his coffee mug down so hard it cracked. "That's enough." I turned to him. "Did you forge my papers? Did you pay someone off to keep quiet?" He stood up fast, chair screeching against the floor. "You need to shut your mouth before you say something you can't take back." Carla stepped between us. "Let it go, Elsie. You have a good life. You were better off with us than with her." Her, the word burned. I took a step back, tears threatening but not falling. "You don't get to decide that. You don't get to steal someone's child and call it saving." Carla's expression hardened. "You don't understand what it was like back then. She wasn't capable, she was my mother." Hank pointed to the door. "You want to chase ghosts, go ahead. But don't come crawling back when you find nothing but pain." I stared at them, these strangers I'd called my parents. Then I turned, walked upstairs, grabbed my backpack, and drove off without looking back. I didn't know exactly where I was headed. But one thing was clear, the truth wasn't in that house, it was out there, in court records, in old hospitals, maybe even on the reservation. Wherever it was, I was going to find it. Kalispell felt colder than Darby, even though the thermometer said otherwise. Maybe it was the emptiness of it, the unfamiliar streets, the hollow echo of boots on icy sidewalks. Or maybe just the growing weight of what I'd left behind. I checked into a cheap roadside motel off Highway 93. It smelled like mildew and bad coffee, but it was a place to think, to breathe, and most of all, to dig. My first stop was the Flathead County Courthouse. The clerk behind the desk barely looked up when I asked about birth records from 1994. "You'll need to file a request," she said, sliding a form across the counter with chipped nails. I filled it out, heart pounding, hands barely steady. When she finally returned, her eyes lingered on the name, Mira Blackcrow. She lowered her voice. "That's a name I haven't seen in a long time." I leaned in. "Do you know her?" The woman hesitated. "You should talk to Sheriff Holbrook. Retired now. But he'd remember her. He always said that girl's case never sat right." I tracked him down to a small ranch just outside town. He answered the door wearing a flannel shirt and suspicion. But when I mentioned Mira Blackcrow, something softened behind his eyes. "I always wondered what happened to that baby," he said, gesturing for me to come in. His cabin was filled with mounted antlers, dusty law books, and the sharp scent of firewood. He poured me a cup of bitter coffee and leaned back in his chair like he'd been waiting 20 years to talk. "Mira was 17, he said. "Smart girl. Wild, but not reckless. Her people didn't have much. But she had fire in her." He paused. "Got pregnant by a boy from the reservation, Jace Two Feathers, I think. Her older sister, Carla, disapproved. Thought Mira was ruining her life." I froze. "Carla McAllister?" His eyes narrowed. "That name means something to you?" I nodded. "She raised me. Told me my real mother was an addict who ran off." Sheriff Holbrook stared for a long time, then sighed. "Far as I remember, Mira gave birth at Kalispell Regional. Baby girl. I saw the paperwork myself. A week later, Mira was gone. Just vanished. No one could explain it. The hospital claimed she checked out. Her sister said she ran off. But I always felt something was off." "Do you think she's still alive?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked me dead in the eye. "If she is, she didn't walk away willingly." I left his place with my heart thudding like a war drum. Everything I'd feared was starting to make sense, and it pointed straight at Carla, the archives, the stories, the silence. Mira didn't leave. She was taken. Just like I was. That night, I stood outside Kalispell Regional Hospital. Staring at the entrance like it might speak. I was getting closer, to Mira, to the truth, to everything they never wanted me to know. It took 3 days, 2 unanswered calls, and 1 long, nerve-wracking drive out to the Flathead Reservation before I found Jace Two Feathers. The tribal office sent me to a community center, where an elder was helping carve ceremonial poles with a group of young boys. He stood tall, lean but weathered, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a low braid. His presence quieted the room, like a man who carried storms behind calm eyes. I waited until the boys left, then approached slowly. "Are you Jace Two Feathers?" He turned to me with a look that pierced right through. "Yes." I handed him the photograph of Mira. "The one from the attic. I think you knew her." His hand trembled slightly as he took it. His eyes softened. "Mira." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "She was my mother. I think. I'm your daughter." He didn't speak right away. He just stared at me, like he was trying to convince himself I was real. Then he reached out, gently, and touched my cheek with his calloused fingers. "You have her eyes." We sat under a pine tree behind the center as the wind whispered through the branches. Jace told me everything. He and Mira had been inseparable as teens. Both outcasts in their own way, he for being native in a mostly white county, she for refusing to conform to Carla's tight-laced expectations. They had dreams of running away, raising their baby far from Bitterroot Valley. But when Mira told Carla about the pregnancy, everything changed. Carla hated me, he said. She said I was dragging Mira down. She called me dirt under her boots. Mira didn't care. But then, after the baby was born, everything shifted. Jace had come to the hospital to see me. But Mira was gone. No warning. No goodbye. The nurses said she'd checked out. Carla said Mira didn't want him involved, she would never have left without me, he said. I knew something was wrong, but no one listened. No one cared. And I didn't have power then. He handed me a small, leather pouch from his coat pocket. Inside was a silver pendant, turquoise set in a sunburst pattern. Mira had this made for you before you were born, he said. She said you'd carried both our spirits. I clutched it tightly, the metal warm from his hands. Do you think she's still alive? He nodded, slow but certain. I found out 2 years ago she's in a facility. Under a different name. Carla had her committed. Drugged. Hidden. But I didn't have the legal ground to get her out. My blood turned to ice. Everything they'd done to Mira, they'd done in the name of control. She didn't run. She didn't abandon me. She was erased, but now I was here. I'm going to bring her home, I said, my voice like flint. Jace looked at me, pride and sorrow etched deep in his face. She's waited her whole life to hear you say that. The drive to Idaho was quiet. Miles of empty highway stretched ahead like a scar, cutting through pine forests and broken fences. In the passenger seat, the leather pouch with Myra's pendant rested in my lap, like a heartbeat I didn't want to lose. I had the address. Jace had found it 2 years ago, tucked away in medical billing records tied to Carla's name. The Glenwood Center for Behavioral Health, a private facility in the hills outside Coeur d'Alene. Hidden. Expensive. Silent. When I arrived, the front gate buzzed open after I pressed the intercom. I was met by clean white walls, lavender-scented halls, and polite staff with clipped smiles. But beneath the polish, it felt like a cage. I'm here to see Margaret Lane, I said at the front desk, the name Mira had been forced to live under for nearly 3 decades. The nurse hesitated. Are you family? I'm her daughter, I said. And I have legal counsel on the line if needed. I flashed the letter from the Kalispell attorney Jace had put me in touch with, brief, but enough to scare them into cooperation. A few phone calls later, I was escorted down a hallway and through a locked door labeled long-term care. They led me to a small room with a window that overlooked nothing but trees. And there she was. She sat in a padded chair by the window, staring into the glass like she'd been waiting for someone, or maybe for the world to remember her. Her hair, once dark like mine, was streaked with gray. Her face was thinner, eyes dull from years of overmedication, but I recognized her. Mira? I whispered. She didn't look at me. I stepped closer. Mom. It's me. Elsie. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes blinking like a fog was trying to lift. I reached into my coat and pulled out the pendant, holding it in her line of sight. Her breath caught. She raised one trembling hand toward it, barely touching the turquoise stone. Her lips parted, and in the faintest voice I've ever heard, she whispered, Sunday bird. Tears streamed down my face. That night, I met with the facility director, armed with documents proving Myra's real identity and detailing the fraudulent adoption. The threat of a lawsuit got them moving. Mira had been committed under orders from Carla McAllister, listed as her guardian, using falsified psychiatric reports. They had no legal leg to stand on now. By morning, Mira was released into my care. As we drove away from the center, I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were clearer now, still tired but no longer hollow. She clutched the pendant like it was a lifeline. You're safe, I said softly. I'm taking you home. She didn't speak, but she smiled, and for the first time in my life, I felt like someone's daughter. The mountains rose into view as I crossed back into Montana, but they didn't feel like home anymore. Not the way they used to. I wasn't the same girl who'd left Darby just a few weeks earlier with a backpack full of questions and a heart full of rage. Now, I had answers. And I had my mother. Mira sat beside me, bundled in Jace's old coat, watching the snowy hills roll by with quiet awe. She barely spoke, but her eyes soaked in every pine tree, every cloud, every mile of land that had once been stolen from her. From us, when we pulled into the driveway of the McAllister ranch, it felt like trespassing. The house I grew up in, the barn I'd mucked out every Saturday morning, the fence I helped repair after that windstorm in '09, it all belonged to someone else now, and that someone was Caleb. The sign out front had been changed: McAllister Ranch Livestock, C. McAllister, proprietor. I parked near the gate and took a long breath before walking up to the porch. The door opened before I could knock. Caleb stood there, arms crossed, smug as ever. "Heard you were back," he said. "And dragging ghosts with you." I ignored him. "You had no right to claim this land." He shrugged. "Dad left it to me in the will." "You ran off. Gave up your place." "I never had a place to begin with," I snapped. "Because it was stolen from me, and from her." I stepped aside, letting him see Mira standing by the truck. His smirk faltered for the first time. "That's not," he began, but I cut him off. "I have proof. DNA tests. Birth records. Adoption fraud. And enough paperwork to sink what's left of this family's name into the dirt." For once, Caleb didn't have a comeback. I left without another word. By the end of the week, I filed suit in Missoula for restitution of the estate, unlawful adoption, and elder abuse. Jace's lawyer helped build the case, and word spread fast. In Darby, gossip was currency, and now everyone was spending it. The whispers started small. At the diner, the feed store, outside the church. Carla's name turned bitter in people's mouths. They remembered things they had once ignored: how she never showed baby pictures of me, how she flinched when Myra's name came up, how she controlled everything like a woman guarding a secret. I stayed with Jace while Mira settled into his small house by the river. She was healing, slowly, but every time she smiled, I felt something being restored. A piece of my history coming home. The McAllisters had written their own story for 30 years, now it was my turn to write the truth, and I wasn't letting go until every lie was stripped bare, and every stolen acre was returned. The morning the FBI knocked on my motel door in Missoula, I didn't flinch. I'd been expecting them. After all, Carla hadn't just committed fraud, she'd orchestrated a decades-long conspiracy involving forged documents, illegal guardianship, and the institutionalization of an innocent woman. Agent Donnelly, a stiff, gray-suited man with sharp eyes, slid a folder across the table to me. "Your attorney was right to reach out. We've confirmed the adoption paperwork was falsified. And based on what we found at the Glenwood facility." He paused. "It's more than enough to open a full federal investigation." I nodded. "She'll run." "She already has," he said. "Left town 2 days ago. No credit card activity since." "Your brother claims he hasn't heard from her." Coward, Hank, I later found out, had collapsed on the porch 2 nights after I served the legal papers. A stroke. Partial paralysis. He was in a care home in Hamilton now, silent, bitter, and clinging to what little pride he had left. He refused visitors. Fine by me, but Carla. I wasn't letting her vanish without facing me first. It took a private investigator to find her. She'd tucked herself into a trailer outside Livingston, hiding like a rotting secret. I drove out there with one photo in my jacket pocket, the one of Mira, smiling, hair brushed back, hands clasped around her turquoise pendant. Free. Alive. She opened the door half an inch when I knocked. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I said, pushing the door open wider. She stepped back, aged and thinner than I remembered. The weight of her lies had started showing in her face. "I thought you'd be grateful," she said. "We gave you a home. A name. You don't know what Mira was, she couldn't raise a child. You drugged her," I snapped. "You had her committed, silenced, erased. You stole her life. You stole my life." She crossed her arms, but her voice cracked. She was falling apart. I did what I had to. I pulled the photo from my jacket and placed it on the small, stained table between us. Carla stared at it. Myra's face, calm, healed, radiant, stared back. She remembers everything now, I said. She remembers you screaming at her. Signing papers she didn't understand. Being taken away from the hospital like a criminal. Carla sat down hard. You don't know the whole story. I don't need to, I said coldly. The courts will hear enough. And the FBI's knocking next. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked away. I stood up and walked to the door. This time, I said, hand on the knob. You don't get to control the ending. Outside, the wind howled through the valley, sharp and bitter, but I felt clean for the first time in my life, because justice wasn't coming, it had already arrived. Spring came early that year, like the land itself was ready for a new start. The snow receded from the Bitterroot Valley in wide, glistening patches, revealing what had been buried for too long. Just like the truth, the court ruling came through on a Thursday. The judge's voice was firm but fair as he read it aloud. The McAllister adoption was unlawful, the inheritance invalid, and the ranch, my birthright, was to be transferred to me, Elsie Marie Blackcrow. Not McAllister. Not their lie. Mine. I stood in the same courthouse where Carla once forged my fate, holding Myra's hand, Jace behind me like a shield. The weight of the past didn't disappear, but it finally loosened its grip. Carla didn't show. Her lawyer entered a plea deal. She'd likely spend a few years behind bars, maybe longer if the elder abuse charges stuck. Hank remained in that care home in Hamilton, unable to speak, surrounded by everything he had stolen and now couldn't use, but I didn't care. I had what mattered. The McAllister ranch was a mess when I returned, fences sagging, cattle sold off, the barn in need of a new roof. Caleb had stripped what he could before retreating to his girlfriend's place in Idaho. I didn't bother calling him. He'd chosen his side a long time ago. I walked the land slowly that first morning. The fields. The creek. The edge of the pine grove where I used to ride as a girl. The house still creaked the same, but now it felt honest, like it had finally exhaled. I changed the name on the mailbox, Blackcrow Ranch. It was more than a name, it was a reclamation. Mira moved into the main house with me. She walked through the rooms like a ghost learning how to live again. Every morning, we'd sit on the porch with coffee, watching deer graze in the distance. She didn't say much at first, but her eyes, those eyes that mirrored mine, carried a peace I'd never seen before. Jace helped rebuild the barn. He worked quietly, steady as the earth beneath us. Some days we talked about the past. Other days, we didn't have to. He was just there, grounding us, reminding me of the blood that flowed through me, strong, resilient, rooted in this land long before any McAllister ever laid eyes on it. I planted a garden where Carla used to keep her rosebushes. Mira chose the seeds. We picked sunflowers, sage, and sweetgrass. Symbols of strength. Of healing. Of coming home. One night, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and lit the sky in fire, Mira looked over at me and whispered, "You brought me back." I shook my head gently. "You never left. They just tried to bury you." She smiled. And in that moment, I knew, truth doesn't stay buried forever, it may take years. Pain. Blood. A reckoning, but it always finds its way home, just like I did. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful tale. What would you have done in Elsie's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and remember, the truth may be buried, but it always finds its way home.